everyone, welcome to another interesting English language class. My name is Precious Balogun. Our theme for today is Oracy Skills Spoken English, with the topic Stress Timing in English Sentences, Correct Phrasing and Voice Modulation in Continuous Prose Reading, Part 2. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to phrase sentences correctly, and lastly, use appropriate tone reflection, avoiding monotone in prose reading. Speaking is the ability to verbally convey information. Now, there are some things we do while we speak. For example, when we speak, we place emphasis on some words. Also, while speaking, we pause in between some words or group of words in a sentence. And lastly, we also change the pitch or tone of our voice while speaking. All these help us clearly communicate and express ourselves. Now, let's go on to our lesson proper. Phrasing is one way we can express ourselves clearly. This is a process of breaking or dividing sentences into breath or thought units. Breath or thought units are short phrases in a sentence that are separated or divided by a pause. Now, this pause can be a comma or a full stop. Each of these units consists of one idea. Now, let's take a look at an example. Brainfriend School in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, is an example of a Montessori school. You notice that after Port Harcourt, there was a pause, and after Rivers State, there was also a pause. Brainfriend School in Port Harcourt is a breath unit, same as Rivers State, and is an example of a Montessori school. Now let's look at some facts about correct phrasing. Remember I said phrasing is made up of breath or thought units, and each unit has just one idea. Now, if an utterance is made up of just one thought, there is no need for a pause. For example, if I just say, in the library, there's no need for a pause because it has just one thought. Next, we have, Ade killed a goat. This is a sentence and it has just one thought. This sentence is not made up of breath units. Another fact about correct phrasing is that the meaning of a sentence may change depending on where we observe the pause. For example, if I say, the boy said, the teacher is dull. And I also say, the boy said the teacher is dull. Notice that there was a change in meaning. The first example, the boy said, the teacher is dull, means that the teacher is dull. But the second sentence, the boy said the teacher is dull, means that the boy is dull. Now let's take a look at some importance of correct phrasing. For this lesson, the first importance is that correct phrasing helps the speaker to catch his or her breath. Let's take a look at an example. These abuses have continued because, for too long, the history of women has been a history of silence. Even today, there are those who are trying to silence our words. You will notice that from these I just read, I was able to catch my breath because of the pauses in between the sentence. Lastly, correct phrasing helps us to clearly express our thoughts and emphasize an idea. Now, by the time we take pauses as speakers in between a sentence, the listener has the opportunity to assimilate the other words that he or she has heard, and also be able to create a mental picture or a vivid picture of what has been said. For example, the NCDC chairman has ordered the Lagos state government to fumigate her streets as a way of curbing the rapid spread of the coronavirus. I'm sure as I read this paragraph, due to the pauses, you were able to assimilate the information I was reading. Remember at the beginning, I mentioned some things that speakers do. I mentioned the pauses, the tone, the pitch, and the pace of the speaker's voice. This brings us to the next concept, which is voice modulation. Now, what is voice modulation? Voice modulation is the way in which a speaker changes or adjusts the tone of his or her voice. For example, there are different ways I can say good morning. I can say good morning, good morning, good morning. It all depends on the way I want to adjust my voice and also the message I want to pass on. Also, a speaker can be fast, slow, or loud. For example, I can say, my name is Ada. And I can also say, my name is Ada. It depends on the speaker. Now, let's take a look at more on voice modulation. We can't take away stress timing and phrasing from voice modulation. Voice modulation has to do with the emphasis we place on words, the pauses, and the way the speaker's tone reflects his mood or her mood. Now, let's take a look at some examples. When I say shut that door, you can tell the emotion because of my tone. You can tell that I am angry. If I say leave my house, you can also tell that I'm not in a very good mood. Now let's take a look at some features of voice modulation. We have tone, pace, pitch, and pause. Now let's take a look at each of them one after the other. The tone is the attitude with which the speaker speaks, and this tells his emotions or feelings. For example, when a speaker says, "Do you know who I am?" Can you tell the emotion of the speaker at that point? You can tell that the speaker is not in a good mood. He's angry. If a speaker says, "Leave me alone," it may really not leave me alone. Yes. If a speaker says, "Leave me alone," this tells that the speaker is not happy. That means he is sad. Next, we have pace. It is the rate at which a speaker speaks. He could be fast or slow. For example, when someone is nervous, he tends to speak fast. But when someone is relaxed and comfortable, they tend to speak slowly so that the other person can hear what they are saying. Pitch is the degree of highness or lowness of the volume of a speaker. So it could be high or it could be low. Let's take a look at some examples. Get out of my sight. At the beginning, you would notice that the volume of my voice was high and then it dropped down and went up again. And lastly, we have pause. Pause is the break a speaker takes in between sentences or within a sentence. Now, we take pauses like the full stop or the comma. The full stop is at the end of a sentence, while the comma is within a sentence. For example, Chioma has a fowl, a dog, a cat, and a goldfish. Next, prior to now, everything was all right. Having looked at the features of voice modulation, what are the importance? 1. Voice modulation gives rhythm to the utterances of the speaker and makes it more interesting to listen. With voice modulation, listening is fun and more interesting. Next, voice modulation brings vitality and flexibility to the speaker's voice. Going on, voice modulation shows the confidence level of the speaker. And lastly, sometimes it helps speakers convince his listeners. For example, someone trying to persuade you to buy a product. With his use of voice modulation, he might be able to convince you to buy that product. Now, this is where I draw the curtain for today's class. But before I go, let's take a quick summary of all we've learned so far. We've learned that correct phrasing is a process of breaking statements into breath units or thought units. We've also learned that voice modulation is a change in stress, pitch, volume or tone of a speaker's voice. And lastly, we learned that some important features that will help a speaker in voice modulation and effective communication are the speaker's pace, pitch, pause, and tone. It's question time. Question 1. Which of the following statements is true about phrasing? A. It is the degree of highness and lowness of a speaker's tone. B. It changes the stress, pitch, and tone of a sentence. C. It expresses a clear thought and emphasizes an idea. Or D. It shows the command and confidence in one's voice. The correct answer is C. Phrasing expresses a clear thought and emphasizes an idea. Question 2. The sentence below reflects the dash of the speaker. What a world! A. Tone. B. Pace. C. Pause. Or D. Phrasing. The correct answer is A. Tone. Thank you for your time. Until we meet again in another interesting class, see you and bye.